Yeah, sure. So, hello all. Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, based on the time zone you are joining us from. I hope you are enjoying Teams Community Day, and then welcome to this session on extending Microsoft Teams with SharePoint Framework. So, it's like we have been using SharePoint for more than 20 years now. So that means we have most of our things done in SharePoint. So in this particular session, we will see how we can extend all of those SharePoint apps that we have been developing so far to Microsoft Teams. So quick introduction of myself. I'm Nandeep Nachan. I'm from Pune, India. I'm a Microsoft MVP for Office Apps and Services, Microsoft certified trainer, author of couple of books on SharePoint Hybrid as well as SharePoint Framework. And onto the right hand side, here are a few social handles to get in touch with me. And with me today is Smita.
Hello all, myself Smita Nathan. I'm from Pune, India, and I'm Microsoft MVP for Office Development category. Apart from that, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and author of one SharePoint hybrid book. And these are some of my social handler by which you can get in touch with me.
All right. So the agenda for this session is like we will see how Microsoft Teams and SharePoint they better work with each other, and then we will see a quick demo of how we can embed that SharePoint site or pages directly inside Microsoft Teams using App Studio, and then we will deep dive towards the SharePoint framework, like how we can bring all those SharePoint framework web parts to Microsoft Teams as a app without kind of rebuilding them. But for example, if we already have built those apps in SPFx or for SharePoint, we can how we can bring those to Microsoft Teams. So the first topic to start with the discussion is very simple. I just wanted to go to the root of this and present this thing. So whenever we create a team inside Microsoft Teams, obviously there will be a site, SharePoint site in the background, and then there will be various document libraries and folders wherein all those structure will get denoted. So I don't want to go into these details, but only thing is like wherever there is a Microsoft Teams team in the background, there will be a SharePoint site for support to Microsoft Teams. And then just in the month of March, we celebrated 20th birthday of SharePoint. So that means we have various apps, or rather I will say SharePoint apps that we have been developing on top of SharePoint for almost 20 years now. So I know that most of those apps might be onto the on-premises, but at least we have started our journey to the cloud so that we can bring all those apps into the SharePoint online world. And then the focus for this particular session will be like how we will see how we can bring all those apps that we have been creating so far for SharePoint to Microsoft Teams. So the focus of discussion will be getting all those SharePoint apps to Microsoft Teams app. All right. So to start with the discussion, firstly, let's see how we can just embed those SharePoint sites inside Microsoft Teams.
So you can use the Microsoft Teams personal app model to pin any modern SharePoint page to the left navigation of Microsoft Teams. So this provides a great opportunity to expose intranet landing pages to serve corporate communication needs directly accessible by Microsoft Teams. So some of the examples scenario you can just include like adding your corporate intranet landing page to Teams for easy discovery of news and content, adding of learning pathways solution to Teams to embed Microsoft 365 learning paths for your users, add single page communications on important topics for your company. So you can embed any modern SharePoint page in Microsoft Teams by writing a Teams personal app and manually creating the needed configuration for this. So the target must be a modern SharePoint site or a page, and embedding classic publishing portals or other classic sites or pages is not supported and will not work. A user can add a personal app from the apps links in Teams, and a user can pin an app to the app bar, that is the topmost navigation in the Teams, by right clicking and choosing a pin. An administrator can deploy and pin an app to all our targeted users from the Microsoft Teams admin centers. So all users accessing the embedded SharePoint page will need to have at least read permission to access the page. And if a tenant, SharePoint site or page name or URL is changed, the team's personal app manifest will be updated. If changes are made to the pinning model of Microsoft pinning model for modern SharePoint pages or site, it could require you to delete the existing pin personal apps and redeploy them. So some of the things you have to consider that there is no native navigation header or footer or embedded pages. Then the search initiated from Teams will return a search results from Teams and not the search results from embedded site. You cannot create a content that is a news pages list or libraries in a Teams. You must create a content from a SharePoint site using a web browser or SharePoint mobile app. And the page comment feature is not available for the SharePoint pages when they are exposed in Microsoft Teams. So this option provides us as a preview as integration path. So now let's see how we can do this. So for that purpose, we will need to use App Studio or any editor to create a Teams manifest file with the necessary URL to your SharePoint pages. And for that, first you have to do is you have to open the Microsoft Teams. Then you have to navigate to the Team Store by clicking the apps on the Teams bar available on the left side. Then you have to search to find that App Studio. So for example, if App Studio is already you have, then you will get an option for open. If it's not available with you, then you will get an option to install. So once you open this App Studio, navigate to the Manifest Editor tab, and from here you have to click create a new app, and then you have to provide some of the information to fill it in the form. So the first thing is the short name, so that you can provide a company internet details, then the full name, internet details you can provide. Then you have to click on the generate to create a unique random app id, then the package name, then you can use a value that is unique to your environment, then the version, generally we start with 1.0.0, then the description of your internet application, the full description, then the developer name can be your name, and the developer information website, your website, company website, or whatever will be your preference. Partner information you can leave it as empty, then the apps URL, this could be the pages in your portal, but you can randomize the value for this one also. In the terms of use, you could also provide a page in your portal and then the branding. So this would be visible on the app bar, that is left navigation, and in the app installation user interface. So there are some of the branding guidelines also. Then after that, you have to navigate to the tabs under the capabilities. Then you have to click on add under the add a personal tab. Over here in the personal tab details, you have to do some of the setups, like you have to provide a name, then the entity ID. You can use any of the random number, then the content URL. So for the content URL, you have to just notice over here what we have provided over here. First is the HTTPS, then there is a domain URL, then there is underscore layout, then 15, then the teamslogon.axpx question mark SPFx is equal to true, and the destination DST is equal to the page URL. So you have to give it in the same format. The URL will be encoded to avoid issues accessing it across the different devices. Then we have a website URL. You can leave this optional also. Then navigate to the domains and permission under the finish, and make sure that the domains from your tabs have your domain on it. So example, you can see that domain value, and under AAD app ID, you can see the details over here. Then the next thing is you have to include your domain URL to the single sign-on value. So over here, for example, you can see all the details. Then the next thing is you have to navigate to the test and distribute under the finished, and then install the solution to your usage by clicking the install button. This will enable you to test the configuration and validate the solution setup. Once it is done, then you have to click on the add to install the application to your personal usage from the App Studio. And after that, verify the application is based on your objective. You can verify it in a both in a web and a desktop. So the one thing is you have to notice that you can modify the settings by going back to the App Studio and editing the manifest using the manifest editor. Also, you can deploy the app to all the users or to the targeted users by downloading the manifest from the App Studio, and we can publish it to the app catalog in a team administration. Yeah. So some of the gaps over here, you can see there are some of the gaps. So it's like there is a no native navigation header, footer, or embedded pages. The search initiated from the teams will return a search result from a teams, not a search result from any embedded site. You cannot create a content like news, pages, list, or libraries in a team. So you must create a content from the SharePoint site using a web browser or SharePoint mobile app, and the page comment feature is not available from the SharePoint pages. Uh, uh, Available from the SharePoint pages only when they are exposed in a Microsoft Teams. So you have to go to the SharePoint, and from there you have to do the page comments and everything, and it will not be available from a Microsoft Teams.
All right. So with that, let's see, like, for example, if we already have our apps built with SharePoint framework, that is SPFx, how we can bring those inside Microsoft Teams. So before a quick introduction of SharePoint framework or SPFX, so in the last few years, SPFX has been very popular and it has become first choice of modern SharePoint developers. So the SharePoint framework plays very important role in customizing modern SharePoint. At the same time, it also supports classic SharePoint. The SPFX solutions are developed using open source toolchains, modern UI standards, and JavaScript libraries of frameworks like Angular, React.js, Knockout, etc. So it is kind of an page and web part model which provides full support for client-side SharePoint development. And with the SPFX, we can use modern web technologies and tools in our preferred development environment. So it could be Windows, Linux, or it could be Mac OS. So all in all, we can support this SPFX in SharePoint Online as well as SharePoint on-premises. So SPFX is not just um, limited to SharePoint, but we can extend it to Microsoft Teams for building the Teams tab, for building the personal app, even for creating the messaging extension. So this is the major focus that we will be targeting for this particular session, as well as we can use SPFX along with Microsoft Graph, Power Automate, as well as with Outlook. So to start with, let's see how we can extend Microsoft Teams with SPFX. So benefits of using SharePoint framework as the platform for Microsoft Teams tab is like the development model is similar to SPFX web part, and then any of the web part can be exposed as a tab or a personal app within Microsoft Teams. So when we talk about this, firstly that we have Teams tab that can be built with SPFX. So with the release of SharePoint Framework version 1.8, Microsoft introduced the possibility to build tabs in Microsoft Teams using SharePoint Framework solutions. So which means any of the SharePoint Framework solution now can be easily ported to Microsoft Teams without any need for external services. So for that, we have something called as supported host property, which we will see when we will move to the code part. Secondly, even we can build our personal app with SPFX. So as a part of SPFX version 1.10, you can also publish your SPFX solutions as Microsoft Teams personal app. So the personal app in Microsoft Team is the app that user can install, and then it can be accessed through the left rail of Microsoft Teams app. So quickly see like how we can extend SPFX apps as a Teams tab or as a personal app. So without going through any of the code, probably I can show you that simply. So this is one example of SharePoint Framework web part. So right now, this particular web part is hosted within SharePoint. So when it is hosted in the SharePoint site, it is able to detect the context of SharePoint site, and then it can show all the information about that particular SharePoint site where it is hosted. So for example, it can show us the title of the SharePoint site where it is hosted, as well as we can go into the more depth by which we'll be able to see more properties as well as any of the list which are lying inside the SharePoint site. So the core objective here is that when this particular web part is available within or hosted within SharePoint's site, it is able to detect that context, and then it is able to render those properties which are for a specific SharePoint site. So let's take this example, and when we host this particular SPFx web part within within Microsoft Teams as a tab. So it detects itself that right now it is running in the context of Microsoft Teams, and from there it can take up the values for Microsoft Teams. So for example, we are showing the title of this team where it is hosted as of now, but even we can go into the more details. We can find out more of the channels, even the associated SharePoint site, and many more. So the same SPFX web part that we have developed for SharePoint without any further rework, we can easily port it to Microsoft Teams, and then from there it can start working as a Teams tab, or even it can be hosted here as a personal app. Okay, so that was very easy example. Let's see like what are the other things that we can do with SharePoint apps to Teams app. So the third example here is that we can use SPFX web part as a Microsoft Teams messaging extension. So SharePoint Framework version 1.11 supports to host our SPFX web part as Microsoft Teams messaging extension. So this offers more power to the developers so that now they can extend SPFX web part to Microsoft Teams as a messaging extension. So let's see like how we can build those kind of messaging extensions using SharePoint Framework. So when building web parts with SPFX version 1.11, we can enable them to be exposed as Microsoft Teams tab, personal app, or even the messaging extension. So for this purpose, what we will need is simply we will need one bot to have a communication between our SPFX web part and Teams, and then we will need Microsoft Teams web app for hosting the solution, and then we will need SPFX web part, and then obviously we will need Microsoft Teams. So at least these are the four major components that we will need. And then let's start with the bot. So bot, for the bot, we will need the bot channel registration done in Microsoft Azure. And then we will create our bot using your Teams. And then we will host that bot onto the Microsoft Teams web app. Or even, for example, if you want to test it locally, we can use ngrok. So with that, let's go into the demo and see like how we can develop all those things. So right now, I'm into the Azure portal here, and from here we can create the bot channel registration. So this is one of the bot channel registration that I have done. So or even if you want to create your own, you can just search for bot channel registration. Um, then you can follow all those instructions, and then from there you will be able to create your own bot channels registration. So once we have that bot channel registration with us, at least from the overview, it will give this specific information about the messaging endpoint for this particular bot channel registration, the subscription, and other details. Major details that we are looking out for here is the configuration. So in the configuration, we can specify this messaging endpoint through which the communication with the bot will happen. So either it could be any of the web app hosted inside Microsoft Azure, or even we can, for a local debugging purpose, we can have use of ngrok. So for keeping it very simple, I am using ngrok here without getting it deployed to the Microsoft Azure web app. So we have that messaging endpoint specified here for ngrok, and then we will have to follow this /API/messages under which endpoint all those messaging will happen. The next major important thing here is this Microsoft App ID, which is common for this particular bot channel registration. And then once you click on this manage, from here we'll be able to create those certificates and secrets by which we'll be able to get authenticated against this bot channel registration. So from here, probably you can just click on new client secret, create your own, or if you have the certificate with you, even you can upload that and use that thumbprint to get authenticated. The next point that we want to do is we will have to channelize this bot channel registration to Microsoft Teams. So for that purpose, we will click on channels. There are various channels which are available for this, including Alexa, Line, Skype, Skype for Business, Telegram, and in this case we will choose Microsoft Teams, so that with this bot channel registration we'll be able to send out the messages to Microsoft Teams. So at least these are the only two configurations that we will need for the bot channel registration. So now let's get back to the Your Teams. So Your Teams is again kind of an open community driven platform by which we'll be able to create our Teams application, including bots, messaging extensions, and all. So this is one example of bot that has been created using Your Teams, which is running onto the Node.js, and right now it is running on Ngrok. So we have used Gulp Ngrok serve, and right now you can see that this one is running onto Ngrok URL called as EF3A, which we have already configured here. Okay, so what happens now is that through bot we'll be able to hit this particular bot channel registration, and all of the communication will happen from there. The next thing that will be for this solution is the SharePoint framework solution, right? So we are going to develop this SPFx solution with version 1.11, and then what we can do is we can just extend our Teams manifest in the SPFX solution with Compose extension, and then from there we can respond to the user interaction, and then we can have communication with the bot that we had developed earlier. So for that purpose, we have this SPFX solution created, which is a very simple SPFX solution. And for that particular solution, we have all of our planets stored in the form of JSON file. And what we do simply is that in this particular SPFX solution, which is developed on React, we simply take hold of all the planets that we have, and we show them in a format of a document card. So all those planets that we have are shown in the format of document card with all the images and basic information about that planet. And then what happens is once we click on any of that particular planet, we send this particular information to our bot, like which planet got clicked, and then bot detects that particular information, and then from the planet's JSON file itself, it tries to get more information about that planet which was clicked. And then in this particular method, which is get planet detect card, it creates an adaptive card and posts that particular adaptive card onto Microsoft Teams. So let's see like how this thing happens. Okay, so for that purpose, I will go to the channel which is specifically created for this Planet Explorer. I can click on this new conversation, and down under here in the messaging extension, we do have Planet Explorer. So once we click that, it opens up all of the planets that we have, which are coming from the planet JSON file. And this one is nothing but an SPFX web part, which is hosted on SharePoint. And as we click on any of the planet, this particular information is sent out to the bot, and then bot respond us back by creating that adaptive card, and then that adaptive card is posted onto the Teams channel. So for example, if I again click on this messaging extension, let's say in this case we select Jupiter as the planet for which we want to get more information, and then that particular information gets sent to the bot. Bot creates this adaptive card and sends on to the Teams conversation. So this is how easily we can create our or a kind of an extend our SharePoint framework solutions to Microsoft Teams as a Compose extension. So for example, again, if I go back to this SPFX solution, from here you can see that we are not extending this solution directly to the Teams, but what we are doing simply is that in this manifest JSON, which is specifically for Microsoft Teams, we just have these configurable tabs, and then these bots by which, and then the Compose extension specified here, by which it is able to detect that this particular SPFX web part should be rendered as a Compose extension and not just any of the other SPFX web part. And from here, that particular web part that we have, which is hosted onto this particular URL, get get the feel of the messaging extension, and then we see that particular messaging extension being rendered on our Microsoft Teams. So, and then for this solution to get deployed, we can package the SPFx solution. We can upload that solution to the SharePoint tenant app catalog. And then all of the content of the Teams folder inside SPFx solution, we can zip that and upload it to Microsoft Teams. And from there, it will start working. So that was a quick demo. Um, Next thing is that we will see, for example, if we have the SPFX solution, how we can even extend those to Teams meeting app. Okay, so for that we have various Teams meeting app. So we have pre-meeting, in-meeting, and post-meeting app experience.
So in a pre-meeting app experience, the permissions users are the users who can add apps to a meeting during a different stages of meeting lifecycle. And these users can add apps to a meeting through the tab gallery in a two ways. So first is using the details tab on the team scheduling form, and the next one is using the meeting chat tab in an existing meeting. And the tabs apps are accessible in a meeting details and the chat pages using a plus button. So the in meeting app experience, the meeting apps are hosted in the top upper bar of the chat window, and as in meeting app experience using the in meeting tab. So when a users add a tab to a meeting through the tab gallery, apps that are during the meeting experience are shown, and the permission users can add apps while in the meeting. And for the post meeting app experience, permissions users can add apps from the tab gallery to a meeting using the details tab on the team scheduling form and the meeting chat tab in an existing meeting.
So in this particular demonstration, we are going to create a pre-meeting app kind of an experience using SharePoint Framework solution. So with the introduction of SPFX version 1.12.1, it supports for Microsoft Teams meeting app development. So this offers again more power to the developers so that they can now extend SPFX web part to Microsoft Teams for building meeting app experiences. So let's see like how this kind of a meeting app experiences can be built. So before that, let me again go back to Microsoft Teams. And from here, we can click on calendar from where we will be able to schedule the meeting. So I will click on the empty slot that we have here, and I will um, create one meeting. I will invite few attendees to this particular meeting, and then I will send out this invitation. So in order to create that pre-meeting kind of an experience, what we can do is we can just open up this particular invite, and then once this invite is open, we can click on this plus icon to add a tab, and then our SPFX solution is available um, in this app as a tab. So here is the solution, which is meeting questionnaire. So once I click on this particular app, this gets added to our Microsoft Teams meeting as the pre-meeting kind of an experience. So from here it will appear once I click save. This particular solution is now available as a tab inside Microsoft Teams meeting. So from here we can post some kind of a questionnaire. So for example, uh, prior to the meeting occurrence, we want to create some kind of questions which can be attended during the meeting execution. We can post those questions. So for example, I will say recording like will this meeting be recorded. So we can kind of ask questions like this, and then this is the place where all those questions will appear. So what will happen is, like, for example, if I close this, any of the other user who was invited to this particular meeting, or who is the organizer of this particular meeting, once he opens up this particular invite, and then once he navigate to this particular tab, which is meeting questionnaire, he will be able to see all those questions which are related to this particular meeting. So this kind of an apps can be used as a pre-meeting app experience, by which the organizer or the other attendees can use this as a platform to ask the question prior to the meeting start. And then during the meeting, all those questions can be addressed, or even they can be discussed. So this was again kind of a very simple example. I do have the code, but just because of the time constraint, I won't be able to walk through the entire code. But again, this one is the simple SPFX solution. And then again, we are exposing that particular solution as a configurable tab inside Microsoft Teams by giving the context of channel tab, meeting chat tab, because of which we are able to see that solution being appearing here as the pre-meeting kind of an experience. And then what we have that in the background, we have one SharePoint list. And in that particular SharePoint list, all of the questions which are asked by the attendees, they are being stored in this particular SharePoint list based on the meeting ID. Because whenever we create any of the meeting inside Microsoft Teams, it has got one unique meeting ID which we can use to store this question against. So this is how it is very much simple, by which we'll be able to extend all of our apps that we have been building with SPFx or with SharePoint to Microsoft Teams without rewriting any kind of things. So that was the quick demo of it. And then, for example, if you want to read more about it and explore more about it, here are a few of the references. And then again, there are a couple of links to my blogs wherein I have explained in more details, like how we can expose all those SPFX, WebPart, or SharePoint apps to Microsoft Teams very easily without rewriting any of our code. All right, so I hope that was interesting. And again, here are a few of the code samples. If you want to deep dive into the code, like how we can do that by going to the code, here are the code samples. So even that particular sample which I shown for the Teams meeting app is available under PNP repository. So if it sounds interesting, I will encourage you to go to that repository and try it on your own. But I guess that was all if we wanted to present. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, and I hope you find it interesting. Thank you very much.